We spent 55 days cruising from Everett, Washington up to Glacier Bay and back. We covered over 2,600 miles by boat. We used Starlink to get weather forecast data and stay in contact with friends and family. But just how well did Starlink work as we ventured into some of the most remote areas of intercoastal cruising? How did I install Starlink on my boat? Did I have issues with performance and weather for Starlink? Let's dive into this video and find out.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within, calling this heavy.
Before we jump into the details, I wanted to share with how well Starlink actually worked for us along our trip. Throughout Southeast Alaska, everywhere we anchored and every port, we had absolutely great coverage. Mouse Cove and Glacier Bay and Tracy Arm Entrance Cove being two of the very most remote locations that we used Starlink in, both performed without issues. That's actually a picture right there of using Starlink in Mouse Cove in bad weather, actually. In the British Columbia Inside Passage, we leveraged Starlink in Fury Cove, Puget Bay, and Low Inlet, all also very remote anchorages with only satellite communications available. I also have a very robust 5G router set up on the boat. I use a Peplink router with a Mobility 42G antenna mounted on the mast that also supports Wi-Fi. Starlink runs through the Peplink router. I don't use the Starlink router. We were traveling with another boat, Janet, on Lemon Drop. We were anchored in Low Inlet, British Columbia. A few days before, I had actually set up Janet's phone to connect to channel surfing via Wi-Fi so she could leverage our internet at the various ports and for getting through customs and stuff. With zero cell service in Low Inlet, and we were safely anchored, I brought out Starlink. Next thing I know, Janet is messaging with Lizina and I on Facebook. She was anchored 522 feet away as measured by radar. Her phone connected via Wi-Fi to the Mobility 42G antenna across the anchorage to the Peplink router and was able to leverage our Starlink on our boat. That was actually pretty cool and surprised me a little bit. Even from the Broughtons down to Desolation Sound and in the San Juans and Puget Sound, all has great Starlink coverage. Here's some of the performance statistics that I took of the various locations that I used Starlink. It literally worked everywhere. Being able to get great weather forecasts was important to me, and Starlink never disappointed. Prior to our Southeast Alaska trip, I reviewed in detail the coverage map for Starlink. Every place that I planned to be where I would use Starlink was covered. Recently, Starlink has been cracking down on usage in the ocean. Channel surfing is an intercoastal cruiser, not an ocean crossing boat. So what matters the most is not how I as a boater define the word ocean, but rather how does Starlink define ocean. It's their service. The black hexagons are considered ocean and therefore require a different translation, more expensive, service plan to use across the ocean. Virtually all of the intercoastal passageways and anchorages we were at were all considered land per Starlink's coverage map. So the basic Starlink mobile plan was all that I needed. Per Starlink's terms and conditions, I never used Starlink on the ocean on our entire Southeast Alaska trip. I didn't permanently install Starlink terminal onto my boat. It's a 27-foot boat. It's just not that big. Also, the Starlink mobile terminal is not marine rated weatherproof, and we did experience 2 days of really bad seas, which resulted in high pressure salt spray all over the top of the boat. I'm quite certain these conditions would have destroyed the Starlink terminal had I permanently mounted it on my boat. Instead, I chose to make it easy to bring out and set up and then take down and put away. So in the cockpit, I installed a weatherproof RJ45 jack that made it easy just to bring the dish out, drop it into a rod holder, plug it in, and then wait about 10 minutes for it to power up. I did convert my setup to be powered directly off of 12 volts so that it uses less power and I don't have to run the inverter to run it. Starlink uses about 40 to 45 watts when powered this way. I also cut out all the extra Starlink cables so that the cable is easier to work with. I bought two items from Starlink's accessory store. Their pole adapter, which I use with some 1-inch PVC pipe and a bungee cord to hold it securely in place in a rod holder. The bungee cord keeps the dish from rotating in the rod holder as the boat slightly rocks and waves. I will leave it out all night, even in the rain, but I do not keep it out when the boat is underway. I use it dockside or at an anchorage only. The backpack is also very well made and protects the dish when not in use. We store the backpack in the cabin when we're not using it. If you'd like to see how to convert your Starlink so that it runs off of 12 volt and doesn't need the Starlink router, in this next video I go over how I did the conversion. I'm going to set up Starlink. like the nice and short cable. In case anybody's asking, this is stern tie. It's for anchoring uphill, basically in British Columbia. And now I just wait about 10 minutes for Starlink to boot up, and then we will be on the internet. Nice backpack. So to put Starlink away, I log into the Starlink app on my phone, because I need to stow it so that the antenna goes upright so it fits back in the case. So just log into the app, I click settings, and then I click stow Starlink. And then the motors will turn, it'll drop it so that it's in the right position. Make sure it's all the way down. Just come down here and just twist the collar, pull it out, cover that so water don't get into it. That's the end of the connector. This thing is awesome, let me tell you. Great find. There's a little button you got to push right here. I cut out all the slack I didn't need for the cable. I left a little bit of slack, but I cut out most of the long cable length. Just it's easier to work with. That's it. You stow this in the cabin, that way it stays out of the elements and stuff when we're underway.
If you enjoyed watching this video, click the screen to watch another.